I sat at the mahogany table in my corner office, looking down at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. 37 floors below, people moved like ants, each one chasing their own version of success. My assistant knocked gently, before entering with a stack of employment contracts that needed my signature. As I flipped through them, one name made me pause, and a slow smile crept across my face. The irony was almost too perfect. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Emma, I hope you're not too busy to see family anymore. Your brother Mike got that job at your company. We're so proud of him." I set the phone down and chuckled softly. If only she knew that Mike wasn't just working at my company, he was working for me. All of them were now. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The smell of burnt turkey filled the cramped kitchen of my childhood home in suburban Cleveland. It was Thanksgiving 2018, and I was 28 years old, sitting at the same wobbly card table my family had used for holiday dinners since I was 12. The good dining table was reserved for my parents, my older brother Mike, my sister Rachel, and her husband Tom. I sat squeezed between two folding chairs with my cousins, relegated to what my mother called the kids' table, even though I'd been an adult for a decade. My father carved the turkey with his usual ceremony, while my mother bustled around serving everyone else first. Mike was telling his latest story about his promotion to regional manager at the insurance company, where he'd worked for 8 years. Everyone hung on his every word like he was delivering a State of the Union address. Rachel chimed in about her husband's new job at the accounting firm and how they were finally looking at buying a house in the suburbs. I picked at my green bean casserole, half listening to the familiar symphony of my family's accomplishments. This was how every holiday went. Mike's career updates, Rachel's domestic achievements, my parents beaming with pride at their successful children. And then there was me, Emma, the family's question mark. My mother finally turned her attention, my way, almost as an afterthought. "So, Emma, how's that little computer thing you do going?" She said it the same way she might ask about a hobby, like I was still playing with toys instead of building something real. I straightened up in my uncomfortable folding chair. "Actually, it's going really well. I just secured my third major client this month, and I'm projecting 6 figures in revenue by next year." The table went quiet for exactly 3 seconds before Mike snorted. "6 figures? Emma, come on. You're working out of your studio apartment. I've seen your setup. It's a laptop on your kitchen counter." Rachel laughed, covering her mouth with her napkin. "Mike, be nice. Emma's trying." The word trying hung in the air like a bad smell. My father looked up from his turkey. "Honey, it's good that you have goals, but maybe it's time to think about something more stable. Mike could probably get you an interview at his company. Right, Mike?" Mike nodded sagely. "Absolutely. They're always looking for people in customer service. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. Real benefits, you know? Not like this freelance stuff where you're always worried about where your next paycheck is coming from." I felt heat rising in my cheeks. I'm not worried about paychecks. "I just told you, I'm on track to make 6 figures. My Uncle Dave, who'd been quietly working on his second beer, decided to join the conversation. 6 figures doing what exactly? Playing on the computer? I run a digital marketing consultancy. I help businesses optimize their online presence, manage their social media strategy, and increase their conversion rates through targeted campaigns. The blank stares around the table told me I might as well have been speaking ancient Greek. My mother patted my hand condescendingly. "That sounds very complicated, sweetheart. But don't you think you'd be happier with something more traditional? Something where you work with people instead of staring at a screen all day?" "I do work with people. I have clients. I have employees now." Mike nearly choked on his stuffing. "Employees? Emma, hiring your friend to help you answer emails doesn't count as having employees. I have 3 full-time contractors and 2 part-time assistants. And Sarah isn't just answering emails, she's my head of creative development. Rachel exchanged a look with her husband. Emma, I think what everyone's trying to say is that we want you to be realistic about your future. This tech stuff is great, as a side hustle, but eventually you're going to want stability. Marriage, kids, a real career. This is a real career. And for your information, I'm planning to scale to 7 figures within 3 years. The laughter that erupted around. The table was loud and immediate. My father actually slapped his knee. Mike was wiping tears from his eyes. Even my sweet grandmother was chuckling behind her water glass. 7 figures? Mike gasped between laughs. Emma, that's millionaire money. Do you hear yourself right now? My mother's expression was a mixture of amusement and concern. Honey, I think you've been watching too many of those entrepreneur shows on Netflix. That's not how real life works. 7 figures, Rachel repeated, shaking her head. Emma, I love your optimism, but come on, be serious. Tom, who rarely spoke at family gatherings, decided this was his moment. My buddy from college tried the whole internet business thing. Lasted about 6 months before he had to move back. In with his parents. These online businesses are just pyramid schemes with better marketing. It's not a pyramid scheme, I said, my voice getting tighter. I have legitimate clients paying for legitimate services. Sure, Mike said, still grinning. And I'm sure it's fun playing businesswoman, but when you're ready to join the real world, just let me know. I'll make some calls. My father raised his beer bottle. Here's to Emma's millions, he announced. May she be the first millionaire to work from her kitchen table. The whole table erupted in laughter again. My face burned with humiliation, but something else was building inside me. Not anger, exactly. More like determination crystallizing into something harder and more focused. You know what? I said, standing up from my folding chair. I'm going to remember this moment. All of you laughing. All of you thinking this is impossible. I'm going to remember exactly how this feels. My mother reached for my arm. Emma, sit down. We're just teasing. We want what's best for you. No, you want what's familiar to you. You want me to settle for what you understand. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story, but I'm not going to do that. Mike was still chuckling. Okay. When you make your first million, you can buy us all dinner. Deal? I looked around the table at their smiling faces, at the certainty in their eyes that I was just a dreamer who would eventually come back to earth. When I make my first million, I'll remember who believed in me and who laughed. Emma, don't be dramatic, Rachel said. We're family. We're allowed to tease each other. I picked up my purse from the back of my chair. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being realistic. The realistic one here is me, not you. You think small because you've always lived small, but I'm going to build something so big that you won't be able to ignore it. My father set down his beer. Emma, where are you going? We haven't had dessert yet. I'm going home to work. While you're all watching football and complaining about your jobs tomorrow, I'll be building my empire. The word empire sent Mike into another fit of laughter. Empire, did you hear that? Emma's building an empire from her studio apartment. I walked toward the door but turned back one more time. Laugh all you want, but someday, when you're all looking for jobs, remember that the woman you're laughing at right now might be the one signing your paychecks. My mother's face fell. Emma, that's a terrible thing to say to your family. I'm not saying it to be terrible. I'm saying it because it's going to happen. I walked out of that house with their laughter still echoing behind me. As I sat in my car in their driveway, I could see them through the window, probably already, moving on to discussing my outburst like it was just another one of Emma's phases. My hands were shaking, Not from anger, but from the absolute clarity of what I had to do. That night, I sat in my studio apartment at my kitchen table with my laptop open. The same setup Mike had mocked, the same space my family saw as proof of my limitations. But as I looked at my client roster, my revenue projections, and the business plan I'd been refining for months, I saw something different. I saw the foundation of everything I was about to build. I opened a new document and started typing. At the top of the page, I wrote, Strategic Plan, Year 1 to 10 million. Below that, I began outlining every step I would take to prove them wrong. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew I was capable of something they couldn't even imagine. The first step was scaling my current client base. I had 3 major clients bringing in a combined $15,000 per month. That was already more than Mike made in his management position, though I'd never bothered to point that out at dinner. I could double that within 6 months if I hired the right people and streamlined my processes. The second step was developing proprietary software tools that I could license to other agencies. I'd already been working on a social media automation platform that could revolutionize how small businesses managed their online presence. The prototype was nearly finished, and I had potential investors who were interested in seeing the final product. The third step was geographic expansion. I'd been focusing on Cleveland and the surrounding areas, but there was no reason I couldn't take on clients nationally or even internationally. The beauty of digital marketing was that location didn't matter. I could serve a client in Tokyo just as easily as one in downtown Cleveland. As I typed, I could still hear Mike's voice in my head. Playing businesswoman, Rachel's patronizing smile, my father's toast to my impossible millions. Instead of making me doubt myself, their dismissal was fuel. Every laugh, every eye roll, every suggestion that I should get a real job was just more evidence that they had no idea what they were talking about. I worked until 3 a.m. that night, refining my business plan and reaching out to potential new clients. By the time I finally went to bed, I had scheduled 4 new prospect meetings for the following week and outlined a hiring plan that would allow me to take on twice as much work within the next quarter. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my mother. I hope you're not upset about last night. We love you and just want you to be happy and secure. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I'm going to be both, just not in the way you expect. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work with an intensity that surprised even me. I was running on about 4 hours of sleep a night, but I'd never felt more energized. Every client meeting was an opportunity to prove my family wrong. Every successful campaign was another step toward the future I'd promised them. By Christmas, just 1 month later, I'd signed 5 new clients and hired 2 additional team members. My monthly revenue had jumped to $28,000. I was exhausted, but I was also exhilarated. The numbers were working. The plan was working. I was working. At the Christmas dinner, the dynamic was slightly different. I sat at the same kids' table, but this time I didn't volunteer much information about my business. When Mike asked how the computer thing was going, I just smiled and said it was fine. I wasn't ready to share my progress yet. I wanted to wait until the numbers were too big to dismiss, too real to laugh at. But I could see the curiosity in their eyes. Something about my confidence had shifted, and they could sense it even if they couldn't name it. I wasn't defensive anymore. I wasn't trying to convince them of anything. I was just quietly building something that would speak for itself. As we sat around the tree opening presents, my mother handed me a gift card to Target and said, I thought, this might help with your apartment setup. It was a $50 gift card, the same amount she'd given me since I was 16. But this year, instead of feeling like a thoughtless afterthought, it felt like a reminder of how small they thought my world was. Mike opened his expensive watch from our parents. Rachel unwrapped a cashmere scarf. I folded my gift card into my wallet and smiled. Thanks, Mom. This will be perfect for when I move into my new office space. New office space? My father asked. I'm outgrowing the apartment setup, looking at some commercial spaces downtown. Mike raised an eyebrow. That sounds expensive. It's an investment, I said simply. In what? Rachel asked. I looked around at their faces, all turned toward me with the same mixture of curiosity and skepticism I'd seen my whole life. In the future you don't think is possible. 18 months later, I stood in the marble lobby of the Huntington building, waiting for the elevator that would take me to the 15th floor. The space I was about to see wasn't just an office, it was a statement. 8,000 square feet of prime downtown real estate that would house my growing team and serve as the headquarters for what was about to become Cleveland's most talked-about digital marketing empire. The real estate agent, Janet, met me at the elevator with a warm smile and a folder full of lease documents. As we rode up together, she chatted about the building's amenities and the caliber of businesses that called it home. Law firms, investment, companies, consulting groups, the kind of established enterprises my family would recognize and respect. Soon, I'd be counted among them. The previous tenant was a tech startup that got acquired, Janet explained as she unlocked the door to Suite 1504. They left behind some great infrastructure, fiber optic internet, conference room technology, even some furniture if you're interested. I walked through the space slowly, visualizing where my team would sit, where client meetings would happen, where I'd build the nerve center of an operation that would soon span multiple states. The corner office had floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the lake. It would be mine. What kind of business did you say you were in again? Janet asked as I examined the built-in shelving in what would become my office. Digital marketing and business automation solutions, I replied. We help companies optimize their online presence and streamline their customer acquisition processes. She nodded politely, though I could tell she didn't fully understand what that meant. Most people didn't, which had always been part of my advantage. While everyone else was trying to figure out what digital marketing actually was, I was already 3 steps ahead, building systems and strategies that would define the industry. How many employees will you be moving in? She asked, pulling out her measuring tape. 12 to start, but we'll be at 25 within 6 months. I said it casually, but the truth was exhilarating. 12 employees. 2 years ago, my family had laughed at the idea of me having any employees at all. Now I was about to sign a lease for office space that could accommodate more people than worked at Mike's entire regional branch. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sarah, my head of creative development, who Mike had dismissed as just a friend answering emails. Netflix deal is confirmed. Contract signed. They want to start the campaign next month. This is huge, Emma. I stared at the message, feeling a rush of triumph mixed with something deeper. Vindication. Netflix, the streaming giant that had revolutionized entertainment, was now trusting me with a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign. The same Netflix my mother had mentioned when she said I watched too many entrepreneur shows. I'll take it, I told Janet, interrupting her explanation of the building's parking structure. Don't you want to see the rest of the space? We haven't looked at the conference rooms or the kitchen area yet. I don't need to see any more. I'll take it. Janet blinked, clearly surprised by the speed of my decision. In her world, business leases were carefully negotiated affairs that took weeks of back and forth. But I'd already run the numbers in my head. The rent was well within my budget, the space was perfect for my needs, and more importantly, it was exactly the kind of professional environment that would make it impossible for anyone to dismiss what I was building as a hobby. The lease term is 3 years, she began, and there's a security deposit equal to 3 months' rent, plus first and last month's rent due at signing. That's fine. When can we schedule the signing? She flipped through her calendar. I could have the paperwork ready by Friday if you can provide financial statements and references. I'll have everything to you by tomorrow. As we rode the elevator back down to the lobby, I could see Janet reassessing me. When we'd first met, she'd probably categorized me as another young entrepreneur with big dreams and limited resources. Now she was looking at someone who could make decisions quickly and back them up with cash. "Just out of curiosity," she said as we walked toward the parking garage, "how long have you been in business?" 3 years, I replied. "But we've experienced significant growth in the past 18 months. What I didn't tell her was that my revenue had grown from $15,000 a month to $120,000 a month in that same time frame. What I didn't mention was that I now had clients in 12 states and was in talks with companies in London and Toronto. What I kept to myself was that the little computer thing my mother had asked about was now generating more annual revenue than my father had made in his entire career. That evening, I sat in my studio apartment one last time, looking around at the space my family had used as evidence of my limitations. The kitchen counter where I'd built my first websites. The corner where I'd conducted video calls with clients who had no idea they were talking to someone working from a 400-square-foot apartment. The folding table where I'd written business plans and marketing strategies that were now being implemented by companies across the country. In 2 weeks, I'd be moving into a real office with a real conference room and a real CEO suite. But tonight, I wanted to appreciate how far I'd come from that Thanksgiving dinner where they'd laughed at my projections. I opened my laptop and pulled up my financial dashboard. The numbers were beautiful. Gross revenue for the year, $1, $4 million, net profit, $890,000. Client retention rate, 94%. Employee satisfaction scores, 9, 2 out of 10. These weren't the fantasies of someone playing businesswoman. These were the metrics of a legitimate enterprise that was doubling in size every 6 months. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Hi, honey. I was just thinking about you. Your father and I were wondering if you'd like to join us for dinner this Sunday. Mike will be there with his new girlfriend, and Rachel's bringing the kids." "I'd love to, Mom, but I'm pretty swamped with work right now." "Oh, that's right. How is the computer business going?" I paused, looking around my apartment at the evidence of everything I'd built. Part of me wanted to tell her everything right then. About Netflix. About the new office. About the fact that her daughter who worked from her kitchen counter was now running a 7-figure business. But something held me back. "It's going well," I said simply. "Well, don't work too hard. You know what they say about all work and no play." "I know, Mom. I'm happy, though. Really happy." "That's wonderful, sweetie. Just remember that there's more to life than work. Mike was just saying the other night that he's worried you're missing out on the important things. Marriage, family, stability." Mike was worried about me missing out on stability. Mike, who made $60,000 a year at a job he complained about constantly. Mike, who was so proud of his regional manager title that he introduced himself that way at parties. Mike was worried about my stability. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. "Good. And Emma? If you ever decide you want something more traditional, your father still has connections. It's never too late to change course." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, processing the conversation. They still saw me as someone who needed saving, someone who was on the wrong path and just hadn't realized it yet. Their concern came from love, I knew that, but it also came from a fundamental inability to see me as I actually was. The next morning, I met with my accountant to review the financial statements Janet would need for the lease application. David had been handling my book since I hired my first employee, and he'd watched my business grow from a promising startup to what he now called a legitimate force in the industry. "These numbers are going to make some people very happy," he said, sliding the printed statements across his desk. "Revenue growth of 800% year over year. That's the kind of trajectory that gets investors excited." "I'm not looking for investors yet," I replied, scanning the documents. "I want to maintain full control for now." "Smart. At this growth rate, you could probably self-fund expansion for at least another 2 years. After that, you'll have your pick of investment partners." As I drove downtown to deliver the paperwork to Janet, I thought about David's comment about investors. 2 years ago, I couldn't have imagined needing investors. The idea of my little marketing consultancy growing large enough to require outside funding had seemed as impossible as everything else my family had laughed at. Now it was just a matter of timing and strategy. Janet called me that afternoon. "Emma, I have to ask, are these financial statements accurate?" "Of course they're accurate. Why?" "It's just that when we first met, I assumed you were a small startup looking for your first real office space. These numbers suggest you're running a pretty substantial operation." "I am." "And you're only 29 years old? Is that a problem?" "No, no problem at all. It's just impressive. The building owners are going to love having you as a tenant. Young, successful, growing rapidly. You're exactly the kind of business they want to attract." Young and successful. The words followed. Me for the rest of the day. At 29, I was generating more revenue than most established firms in Cleveland. I was employing 12 people and providing them with salaries, benefits, and career growth opportunities. I was competing with agencies that had been in business for decades, and I was winning. That weekend, I couldn't resist driving past my parents' house. It was the same modest ranch home where I'd grown up, where I'd sat at the kids' table, where they'd laughed at my impossible dreams. The driveway had the same crack running down the middle. The front porch still had the wobbly railing my father kept saying he'd fix. As I sat across the street in my car, I thought about the contrast between their world and mine. They lived in a universe where success was measured by steady paychecks, reliable benefits, and predictable career paths. I lived in a universe where success was measured by impact, growth, and the ability to build something from nothing. Neither world was wrong, but they were incompatible. And for the past 3 years, I'd been trying to explain my world to people who didn't speak its language. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from a reporter at the Cleveland Business Journal. "Ms. Thompson, I'm writing a feature story about young entrepreneurs who are reshaping Cleveland's business landscape. Your company came highly recommended by several sources. Would you be available for an interview next week?" I read the email twice before it fully sank in. The Cleveland Business Journal wanted to interview me, the same publication my father read religiously every morning, the same magazine Mike quoted whenever he wanted to sound knowledgeable about business trends. They wanted to feature me as one of Cleveland's rising entrepreneurs. I replied immediately, agreeing to the interview and suggesting we meet at my new office space. By the time the article came out, I'd be operating from the Huntington building, looking every inch the successful businesswoman I'd become. The lease signing was scheduled for Friday morning. As I dressed for the appointment, I chose my outfit carefully: a navy blazer, crisp white shirt, and heels that added just enough height to make me feel powerful. I looked in the mirror at someone my family wouldn't quite recognize. The uncertain, young woman who'd left their Thanksgiving dinner in frustration had been replaced by someone who commanded respect in boardrooms and conference calls. Janet met me in the building's management office with all the paperwork ready. The lease agreement was thick, full of legal language that would have intimidated me 3 years ago. Now I read through it efficiently, understanding every clause and implication. "Any questions?" Janet asked as I reached the signature pages. "Just one. When can I start moving in?" "As soon as we have your signed lease and payment, you can have the keys. The space is move-in ready." I signed my name with a flourish, then wrote a check for the security deposit and first month's rent. The amount was substantial, more than most people made in several months, but I wrote it without hesitation. This was an investment in the future I'd been building since that night I'd left my family's dinner table. "Congratulations," Janet said, handing me a set of keys. "Welcome to the Huntington building." As I rode the elevator up to the 15th floor, keys in my hand, I thought about all the people who'd doubted this moment would ever come. In a few hours, I'd call my team and tell them about our new headquarters. Next week, we'd start moving in equipment and furniture. Within a month, we'd be hosting client meetings in a space that screamed success and legitimacy. I unlocked the door to Suite 1504 and walked through the empty space that would soon house my empire. The corner office would be mine, but I'd earn it every day by making decisions that affected 12 employees and dozens of clients. The conference room would host meetings that determined marketing strategies for companies across the country. The open workspace would buzz with the energy of talented people building something meaningful together. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah. "Emma, how did the lease signing go?" "We're officially moving to the Huntington building. Start looking at furniture catalogs. I want us moved in within 2 weeks." "This is incredible. I can't wait to tell the team. They're going to be so excited to finally have a real office." "Sarah, I need you to schedule a team meeting for Monday morning. We're going to talk about the next phase of our expansion, and I want everyone to understand just how big this is about to get." "How big are we talking?" I looked out the windows of my new corner office, at the city sprawling below me, at the lake stretching toward the horizon. Big enough that no one will ever question what we're building again. After we hung up, I stood alone in my new office, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. I was no longer a woman working from her kitchen counter. I was the CEO of a legitimate company with a prestigious address and a team of employees who depended on me for their livelihoods. My family still saw me as their uncertain youngest daughter, the one who needed guidance and protection. But the woman standing in this corner office was someone else entirely. She was someone who made decisions that affected multiple businesses and dozens of lives. She was someone whose opinion was sought by industry publications and whose strategies were implemented by major corporations. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was fundamental. I'd become the person I'd always known I could be, the person my family had never been able to see. As I locked up the office and headed home to my apartment for one of the last times, I made a decision. It was time to stop hiding my success from the people who'd refused to believe it was possible. Not because I needed their validation, but because I was finally ready to show them who I'd become while they weren't paying attention. The little girl who'd sat at the kids' table was gone. In her place stood a CEO who was about to change everything they thought they knew about success, ambition, and what was possible when someone refused to accept other people's limitations. The interview with Cleveland Business Journal was scheduled for the following Thursday. By then, I'd be settled into my new office, surrounded by the visible evidence of everything I'd built. And for the first time since that Thanksgiving dinner, I was looking forward to talking about my business with people who would actually understand what I'd accomplished. The Cleveland Business Journal article hit the newsstands on a Tuesday morning in March. I hadn't told anyone in my family it was coming. I wanted to see if they'd discover it naturally, the way the rest of Cleveland would discover that their daughter and sister had been featured as one of the city's most promising young entrepreneurs. The headline read, "Digital Dynasty, How 29-Year-Old Emma Thompson Built Cleveland's Fastest-Growing Marketing Empire." Below it was a full-color photo of me in my corner office, arms crossed confidently, the city skyline visible through the windows behind me. The article detailed my company's meteoric rise, our impressive client roster, and my plans for national expansion. I bought 5 copies from the newsstand outside my building and kept them in my desk drawer. Not out of vanity, but as evidence. Evidence that the dreams my family had laughed at weren't dreams anymore. They were documented reality. My phone started ringing at 8 in the morning. The first call was from a potential client in Chicago who'd seen the article. The second was from a business development manager at Google. The third was from my mother. "Emma, honey, Mrs. Patterson? From next door just brought over a newspaper. There's an article about you in it." I could hear the confusion in her voice, the struggle to reconcile the daughter she thought she knew with the woman described in the business journal. "Yes, Mom. They interviewed me last week. It says here that your company made $1.4 million last year. That can't be right, can it?" It's right. The silence stretched between us. I could picture her in their kitchen, reading glasses perched on her nose, trying to process numbers that were bigger than anything she'd expected. Emma, why didn't you tell us? This article makes it sound like you run some kind of major company. I do run a major company, Mom. That's what I've been trying to tell you for 3 years. But at Thanksgiving, when you said 7 figures, we thought you were exaggerating. I wasn't exaggerating. I was projecting. And I hit that projection 6 months ahead of schedule. Another long pause. I could hear my father's voice in the background, asking what was wrong, why she looked so shocked. Your father wants to talk to you. Dad's voice came on the line, gruff and uncertain. Emma, is this article accurate? It says you have 15 employees now. 18, actually. We've hired 3 more since the interview. 18 employees. He repeated it like he was trying to make sense of a foreign language. And you're really making over $1 million a year? Yes, Dad. I'm really making over $1 million a year. Doing what, exactly? I still don't understand what digital marketing means. I'd had this conversation with clients, investors, and reporters dozens of times, but explaining it to my father felt different, more important, and more frustrating at the same time. We help companies reach their customers online. We create advertising campaigns, manage social media accounts, build websites, and develop strategies that turn internet traffic into sales. In the past year, we've helped our clients generate over $50 million in additional revenue. $50 million? His voice cracked slightly. Emma, that's more than most companies in Cleveland make. I know, Dad. Why didn't you tell us? Why did we have to find out by reading it in the newspaper? The question hung in the air, loaded with 3 years of misunderstanding and missed opportunities. Why hadn't I told them? Because every time I'd tried, they'd laughed. Because every time I'd shared my progress, they'd suggested I get a real job. Because somewhere along the way, I'd stopped trying to make them understand and started focusing on proving them wrong. I tried to tell, you, Dad, remember Thanksgiving 2 years ago when I said I was going to make 7 figures? Remember Christmas when I mentioned the new office space? I've been telling you, but you weren't ready to hear it. We thought you were we didn't know it was this serious. It's been serious for a long time. Mike called an hour later. His tone was different than I'd ever heard it, not dismissive or condescending, but genuinely confused and maybe a little intimidated. Emma, I just saw the article. Is this for real? It's for real, Mike. You're actually making more in a year than I make in 20 years? The math was stark when he put it that way. My annual revenue was indeed equivalent to about 20 years of his salary. But it wasn't just about the money, it was about the trajectory, the growth, the fact that I was building something that would continue expanding while his job would remain essentially the same. Mike, it's not about comparing salaries. We're in completely different industries. Different industries? Emma, you're in a different universe. This article talks about you like you're some kind of business mogul. I'm just someone who saw an opportunity and worked hard to capitalize on it. Worked hard? Emma, I work hard. Rachel works hard. But we're not running million-dollar companies. What makes you so different? It was a fair question, and one I'd asked myself many times. What did make me different? Was it intelligence? Luck? Timing? Or was it simply the willingness to bet on myself when everyone else was betting against me? I think the difference is that I never accepted other people's limitations as my own. When you told me I should get a customer service job, I kept building my business. When Dad said I should be realistic, I kept expanding. When everyone laughed at my projections, I kept working to make them reality. But how did you know? How did you know it would actually work? I didn't know. That's the point. I believed it was possible, and I was willing to work as hard as necessary to find out if I was right. The conversation with Mike lasted an hour. By the end, he sounded smaller somehow, like the article had shifted something fundamental in how he saw both of us. For 3 years, he'd been the successful sibling, the one with the stable career and the steady income. Now he was asking me for advice about his own professional future. Rachel called that evening. Her approach was different. More emotional, less analytical. "Emma, I feel terrible. We've been treating you like you're still 25 and figuring things out, but you've been running a real business this whole time. It's okay, Rachel. I know it's hard to see someone change when you're used to thinking of them a certain way. But it's not okay. We should have been supporting you instead of questioning you. We should have been celebrating your success instead of worrying about your stability. You were worried because you cared. I understand that. No, Emma. We were worried because we couldn't see past our own experiences. We couldn't imagine success looking different than what we knew." That conversation was the most honest one I'd had with any of my family members in years. Rachel acknowledged something that the others were still struggling with, that their inability to understand my path didn't make it wrong or unrealistic. Over the next few weeks, the dynamic shifted dramatically. Instead of offering me job opportunities, Mike started asking for business advice. Instead of suggesting I needed more stability, my parents started bragging to their friends about their daughter's success. Instead of treating my work like a hobby, Rachel started referring clients to me. But the most significant change came when my father called me with a request that would have been unimaginable 6 months earlier. "Emma, I know this might sound strange, but I was wondering if you might have any job openings at your company." I almost dropped the phone. My father, who had toasted my impossible millions with sarcasm, was asking me for a job. "Dad, are you serious?" "Well, I've been thinking about retiring from the plant, but your mother and I could use some additional income. And after reading about your company, it sounds like an interesting place to work." The plant where he'd worked for 35 years was closing in 6 months. He'd been dreading forced retirement, worried about making ends meet on his pension. Now he was asking his daughter, the one whose career he'd never understood, to provide him with employment security. "What kind of role were you thinking about?" I asked carefully. "I don't know much about computers, but I'm good with people. Customer service, maybe? Or helping with administrative stuff?" The irony was overwhelming. 3 years ago, Mike had suggested I apply for customer service jobs. Now my father was asking me to give him one. "Let me think about it, Dad. We might have something that would be a good fit." "I'd really appreciate it, Emma. And I want you to know that I'm proud of what you've built. I may not understand all of it, but I can see that it's something special." After we hung up, I sat in my office processing what had just happened. My father was ready to work for me. Not beside me, not in partnership with me, but for me. The man who had raised his beer bottle to toast my impossible millions was now asking me to sign his paychecks. The requests kept coming. My Uncle Dave, who'd mocked my computer playing, wanted to know if I needed help with marketing to local businesses. His area of expertise, he claimed. My cousin Jennifer, who'd always been dismissive of my unconventional career path, suddenly wanted to discuss opportunities in social media management. Even Mike, after weeks of asking for general business advice, finally worked up the courage to ask the question I'd been expecting. "Emma, I know you're probably not interested in hiring family, but if you ever need someone with management experience, I'd be open to discussing it." Mike wanted to work for me. The brother who'd laughed at my kitchen table setup was now positioning himself as a potential employee. "What made you change your mind about my business?" I asked him. "Honestly, the numbers. I can't argue with $4 million in revenue and 18 employees. Whatever you're doing it right." "It's not just about the numbers, Mike. It's about building something meaningful, creating value for clients, and providing opportunities for talented people." I get that now. I just wish I'd gotten it sooner. The conversation that changed everything, though, came from an unexpected source. My grandmother, who was 87 and had watched our family dynamics for decades, called me on a quiet Sunday morning. "Emma, dear, I've been thinking about that newspaper article." "What about it, Grandma?" "I remember when you were little, you used to build these elaborate structures with blocks and cardboard boxes. Your parents would tell you to clean up your mess, but I could see that you weren't making a mess. You were creating something." I smiled, remembering those childhood construction projects that had frustrated my neat freak mother. "I used to wonder what you'd build when you grew up. Now I know." "What do you think I built, Grandma?" "You built exactly what you always said you would. You built something that nobody else could see coming, something that wouldn't exist if you hadn't imagined it first." Her words hit me harder than all the congratulations and job requests combined. My grandmother had seen something in me that the rest of the family had missed, and she'd been quietly waiting for everyone else to catch up. "There's something else I want to tell you," she continued. "I've been watching your family these past few weeks, seeing how they've changed since that article came out. And I want you to know that you don't owe them anything just because they finally understand what you've been doing." "What do you mean?" "I mean that success doesn't obligate you to rescue people who didn't believe in you when you needed them to. You have every right to enjoy your achievements without feeling guilty about who does or doesn't benefit from them." My grandmother's wisdom crystallized something I'd been struggling with. The job requests from my family weren't just about employment. They were about redemption. They wanted to be part of the success they'd once mocked, to transform from doubters into beneficiaries. But I had built this company without their support, and I could run it without their participation. That realization led to the most difficult decision I'd made since leaving that Thanksgiving dinner 3 years earlier. I called a family meeting. We gathered at my parents' house on a Saturday afternoon, the same dining room where they'd laughed at my projections, but the dynamic was completely different now. They looked at me with a mixture of pride, confusion, and hope. I looked at them with clarity. "I want to talk to all of you about something important," I began. "Over the past few weeks, several of you have asked about job opportunities at my company." Mike shifted in his chair. My father looked down at his hands. Rachel watched me intently. "I've thought about it carefully, and I've decided that mixing family and business isn't the right choice for my company." The silence was immediate and heavy. "Emma," my mother started, "we understand if you don't have positions available right now, but maybe in the future." "It's not about availability, Mom. It's about maintaining professional boundaries and protecting what I've built." My father's face flushed. "Are you saying you won't help your own family?" "I'm saying that I won't compromise my business by hiring people based on their relationship to me rather than their qualifications." "But we are qualified," Mike protested. "I have management experience. Dad has 35 years of work experience. Rachel has a degree in communications." "You're all qualified for many things," I agreed. "But you're not qualified for my industry. And more importantly, 3 years ago, when I needed your support and encouragement, you laughed at me instead. I built this company despite your doubts, not because of your help." The words hung in the air like a challenge. This was the moment I'd been unconsciously preparing for since that Thanksgiving dinner. The moment when I would have to choose between family obligation and business integrity. "Emma, that's not fair," Rachel said. "We were just trying to protect you from disappointment." "You were protecting yourselves from having to believe in something you didn't understand. There's a difference." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "So you're punishing us for caring about you?" "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm making a business decision based on what's best for my company and my employees. The 18 people who work for me depend on me to make smart choices about who I hire and why. I can't jeopardize their livelihoods by making decisions based on family politics." "Family politics?" My father's voice was rising. "Emma, we're your family. We're proud of you now. Isn't that enough?" Being proud of me now doesn't erase 3 years of dismissing my work as playing on computers. Being proud of me now doesn't change the fact that you toasted my impossible millions with sarcasm. Mike leaned forward. Emma, we made mistakes. We admit that. But we're trying to make it right. Making it right doesn't mean getting jobs at my company. Making it right means respecting my decisions and understanding that success doesn't come with an obligation to hire everyone who doubted me. The meeting ended with hurt feelings and confused expressions. They'd expected their newfound pride in my achievements to translate into opportunities for themselves. Instead, they discovered that success had given me something more valuable than money: the power to choose who deserved access to what I'd built. Over the next few months, I watched my family process this new reality. Some of them struggled with it more than others. Mike went through what seemed like stages of grief, moving from anger to bargaining to eventual acceptance. My parents oscillated between pride in my success and resentment at being excluded from it. But Rachel surprised me. 2 weeks after our family meeting, she called to apologize. Emma, I've been thinking about what you said, and you're right. We didn't support you when you needed it, and now we're expecting to benefit from your success. That's not fair to you or to the people who did support you. I appreciate you saying that, Rachel. I also want you to know that I'm proud of you for sticking to your principles. It would have been easier to just hire us and keep everyone happy, but you made the harder choice because it was the right choice. That conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. Rachel stopped asking for favors and started asking about my work because she was genuinely interested. She became the family member who could talk about my business intelligently, who understood that being a CEO meant making difficult decisions that not everyone would like. The others took longer to come around, but eventually they did. My father found a part-time job at a local hardware store and discovered he enjoyed interacting with customers more than he'd expected. Mike started his own small consulting business, inspired by my example, but focused on his own expertise in traditional sales management. And slowly, grudgingly, they began to respect not just my success, but my right to control how that success was shared. The strategic response I'd crafted wasn't about revenge or exclusion. It was about boundaries. I'd learned that building something valuable meant protecting it from people who wanted to benefit from it without having contributed to it. Family relationships didn't exempt anyone from that principle. By the end of that year, my company had grown to 28 employees and was generating over $2 million in annual revenue. We'd expanded into 3 new markets and signed contracts with clients in 8 states. The little computer thing had become a legitimate business, empire, exactly as I'd predicted at that Thanksgiving dinner. And through it all, I'd maintained the standards and principles that had gotten me there in the first place. Success hadn't changed who I was. It had revealed who I'd always been underneath other people's expectations and limitations. The woman, who'd left her family's dinner table in frustration 3 years earlier, had transformed into a CEO who commanded respect in boardrooms across the country. But more importantly, she'd learned that the most powerful response to doubt isn't proving people wrong. It's building something so undeniably successful that their opinion becomes irrelevant. The economic downturn hit Cleveland 6 months later, like a slow-moving storm that everyone could see coming but no one was prepared for. The manufacturing sector, which had been struggling for years, finally collapsed under the weight of automation and overseas competition. Companies that had survived previous recessions found themselves facing bankruptcy. Workers who had considered themselves secure discovered that decades of experience meant nothing when entire industries disappeared overnight. My father's plant closed 2 months ahead of schedule. Mike's insurance company downsized their regional operations and eliminated his position along with 60% of the local staff. Rachel's husband lost his accounting job when his firm merged with a larger company that already had enough accountants. Within the span of 3 months, nearly everyone in my family was facing unemployment in a city where jobs were becoming increasingly scarce. I watched it unfold from the insulated environment of my thriving business. While traditional companies struggled to survive, digital marketing had become more essential than ever. Businesses that had once relied on word of mouth and traditional advertising were desperately seeking online solutions to reach customers who were no longer shopping in stores or responding to conventional marketing methods. My company not only survived the economic crisis, we flourished. Companies across the Midwest were calling us, begging for help transitioning their operations online. We were hiring new employees every month while other businesses were laying people off. Our revenue jumped from $2 million to $4 million annually as we became the lifeline for companies fighting to stay relevant in a rapidly changing economy. The phone calls from my family started again, but this time they carried a different tone. Not requests for employment, but barely concealed desperation. My mother called first, her voice strained with worry I'd never heard before. "Emma, honey, I know you said you couldn't hire family, but your father's been out of work for 2 months now. The plant closure was so sudden, and there just aren't many opportunities for men his age." "I'm sorry to hear that, Mom. How is he handling it?" "Not well. He's been looking for work every day, but most places want younger people or people with computer skills. He's starting to feel like the world has passed him by." The irony wasn't lost on me. My father, who had dismissed my computer skills as playing, was now struggling to find work precisely because he lacked those same skills. "What about retraining programs? The state usually offers assistance for displaced workers." "He's looking into it, but Emma, he's 58 years old. Starting over at his age feels impossible." There was a long pause before she asked the question I knew was coming. "I know you have your reasons for not hiring family, but maybe you could make an exception. Just until he gets back on his feet?" "Mom, I understand this is difficult, but my position hasn't changed. Hiring family would compromise the integrity of my business." "But he's your father, Emma. Doesn't that count for something?" "It counts for a lot, but not in a professional context. If Dad wants to work in digital marketing, he needs to develop the skills and experience that would make him a valuable employee, regardless of his relationship to me." Mike's call came a week later. His unemployment benefits had run out, and his savings were nearly depleted. The confidence that had defined him for most of his adult life had been replaced by something I'd never seen in him before: genuine fear. "Emma, I need to swallow my pride here. I know I was wrong about your business, and I know you said you don't hire family, but I'm running out of options." "What kind of work are you looking for?" "Anything. I've been applying for sales positions, management roles, even customer service jobs. Nobody's hiring, or when they are, they want people with specific technical skills I don't have." "Have you considered learning those skills?" "At 42? Emma, I don't know the first thing about computers beyond checking email and browsing the internet. By the time I learned enough to be useful, I'd be broke and homeless." His admission was startling. Mike, who had always positioned himself as the successful, stable sibling, was revealing that his skill set was almost entirely obsolete in the modern economy. There are online courses, community college programs, even YouTube tutorials that could teach you basic digital marketing concepts. I can't afford college, and I don't have time to spend months learning new skills while my bills pile up. I need income now. The desperation in his voice was genuine, but it didn't change the fundamental issue. Mike wanted me to solve his problem without him having to adapt or grow. He wanted the benefits of working in a modern, successful company without investing in the knowledge and skills that made such companies successful. "Mike, I genuinely wish I could help, but I have a responsibility to my existing employees and clients. I can't compromise that responsibility, even for family." "So you're just going to watch your own brother lose his house?" The question hung between us like an accusation. In his mind, my refusal to hire him was equivalent to abandoning him. But from my perspective, hiring unqualified people, regardless of their relationship to me, would be abandoning the 28 employees who depended on my company for their livelihoods. I'm not responsible for your housing situation, Mike. I'm responsible for making decisions that keep my business healthy and my employees secure. The call ended badly, with Mike accusing me of being cold and calculating, of forgetting where I came from and who had supported me. The irony of that last accusation was particularly sharp, given that his support had been limited to suggestions that I get a customer service job. Rachel's situation was different but equally desperate. Her husband's unemployment had pushed them to the brink of foreclosure. She called me crying, something I'd rarely seen her do as an adult. "Emma, I don't know what we're going to do. Tom's been looking for work for 3 months and we're behind on our mortgage. The bank is starting foreclosure proceedings." "I'm sorry, Rachel. That must be incredibly stressful." "It is. And I keep thinking about how well your business is doing, how you're hiring people all the time. And I wonder if there might be something for Tom. He's good with numbers, he's reliable, and he's willing to learn. What kind of background does he have in digital marketing?" "None, but he's smart and he picks things up quickly. Maybe he could start in an entry-level position and work his way up." "Rachel, all of our entry-level positions require at least basic knowledge of social media platforms, content management systems, and analytics tools. We don't have the resources to train someone from scratch in fundamental digital concepts." "But you trained other people, didn't you, when you were starting out?" "I trained people who already had relevant experience or education. I didn't train people who had never worked in the industry before." "So, there's nothing? No filing, no answering phones, no basic administrative work?" "We outsource most of our administrative functions to specialized services. The few admin tasks we handle internally are integrated with our marketing platforms and require technical knowledge." The conversation continued for 20 minutes, with Rachel trying different angles and me explaining why none of them were viable. By the end, she was angry and hurt. "You know, Emma, success has really changed you. The sister I grew up with would have found a way to help her family." "The sister you grew up with couldn't help her family because she didn't have the resources or the platform. Now I have both, but I also have responsibilities that didn't exist before." "Responsibilities to strangers are more important than responsibilities to family?" "Responsibilities to the people who believed in me when my own family didn't are more important than obligations to people who only want my help now that I've proven them wrong." That conversation marked the end of my close relationship with Rachel. She couldn't understand why I wouldn't compromise my business standards to solve her problems, and I couldn't explain it in a way that didn't sound cruel to someone facing foreclosure. The economic pressure on my family intensified over the following months. My father eventually found part-time work at a fraction of his previous salary. Mike took a temporary job at a call center that paid barely above minimum wage. Rachel and Tom lost their house and moved into a rental apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. Meanwhile, my company continued to grow exponentially. We expanded into new markets, signed major corporate clients, and opened satellite offices in Columbus and Pittsburgh. By the end of the year, we were generating over $6 million in annual revenue and employing 43 people across 3 cities. The contrast between my family's decline and my company's rise created a tension that poisoned every interaction. Family gatherings became exercises in careful navigation, with everyone aware of the elephant in the room, but no one willing to address it directly. My mother tried to play peacemaker, organizing dinners where we could all pretend things were normal, but normal had become impossible. My father sat quietly through meals, his reduced circumstances evident in everything from his clothes to his posture. Mike made bitter comments about people who forgot their family when they became successful. Rachel stopped attending altogether. The breaking point came at my 30th birthday party. I'd planned a small celebration at an upscale restaurant, downtown, thinking it would be neutral territory where we could focus on the occasion rather than the underlying tensions. My parents arrived looking uncomfortable in their best clothes, which were clearly showing their age. Mike came alone, having recently gone through a divorce that he partly blamed on his financial struggles. Rachel declined to attend, citing previous commitments that everyone knew were fabricated. The conversation started normally enough, with polite questions about my business and careful avoidance of sensitive topics. But as the evening progressed and the wine flowed, the underlying resentments began to surface. "It's amazing how much this place costs," my father commented, looking at the menu. "I could eat for a week on what one of these entrees costs." "It's a special occasion, Dad. I wanted to celebrate somewhere nice." "Must be nice to be able to afford places like this whenever you want." Mike set down his wine glass a little, too forcefully. "Some of us are barely scraping by while others are living like royalty. Mike, please don't start." "Start what? Pointing out the obvious? Emma, you're making millions of dollars while your own family is struggling to pay rent. How is that not worth talking about?" "My income doesn't obligate me to support everyone else's lifestyle." "Support our lifestyle?" "Emma, we're talking about basic survival. Dad's working part-time at Home Depot. I'm answering phones at a call center. Rachel lost her house. We're not asking for luxury. We're asking for help." "You're asking for jobs you're not qualified for." "Qualified according to who? According to you? The person who used to work at her kitchen table?" The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Other diners were starting to stare at the family drama unfolding at our table 12. "I worked at my kitchen table while learning skills and building a business. You want me to hand you positions you haven't earned in an industry you don't understand? So, teach us, train us, give us a chance to earn those positions." "I don't have the resources to provide career training for family members. I have a business to run and employees who depend on me to make smart decisions." My mother finally intervened. "Can we please not do this here? It's Emma's birthday." But Mike wasn't finished. "You know what, Emma? I remember when you left our Thanksgiving dinner talking about how you'd remember who believed in you. Well, I hope you also remember who needed you when you had the power to help and chose not to." He stood up, threw his napkin on the table, and walked out of the restaurant. My father followed him after leaving money for his portion of the meal. My mother sat there looking embarrassed and heartbroken. "I'm sorry, honey. I thought we could have one nice evening together." "It's not your fault, Mom." "Isn't it? I feel like I failed somewhere. My children should be supporting each other, not fighting like this." "We're not fighting about support, Mom. We're fighting about expectations and boundaries." "Is there really no way you could help them? Even something small?" I looked at my mother, sitting across from me in the expensive restaurant, asking me to compromise everything I'd built for people who had never believed it was possible. The woman who had suggested I get a customer service job was now asking me to provide customer service jobs to my unemployed family members. "Mom, if I hire unqualified people because they're related to me, what message does that send to the employees who earned their positions? What happens to the standards that made my company successful in the first place?" "But their family, Emma. That has to count for something." "It does count for something. It counts for the fact that I've never stopped loving them or wanting them to succeed. But it doesn't count for compromising my professional judgment or risking the livelihoods of the people who work for me." The party ended with just my mother and me, sitting in an expensive restaurant, both of us wondering how success could feel so much like failure. Over the next few months, my family's financial situation continued to deteriorate. The economic recovery that economists kept promising never materialized for people with obsolete skills in declining industries. My father's part-time job became his full-time reality. Mike's call center position was eliminated during another round of downsizing. Rachel's family moved again, this time to a smaller apartment they could barely afford. Through it all, my company thrived. We landed a contract with a Fortune 500 company that alone was worth more than my family's combined lifetime earnings. We opened our 4th office and hired our 60th employee. Industry publications started featuring me as one of the Midwest's most successful young entrepreneurs. The contrast became impossible to ignore. Local newspapers ran stories about my business success while my family struggled with unemployment and underemployment in the same city. People who knew us would ask my parents how it felt to have such a successful daughter, not knowing that success had driven a wedge through our family that seemed impossible to repair. My grandmother, now 88 and increasingly frail, asked me to visit her one afternoon. She'd been following the family drama with the wisdom that comes from having lived long enough to see patterns repeat across generations. "Emma, dear, I want to talk to you about something important." "What is it, Grandma?" "I've been watching what's happening with your family, and I want you to know that you're not responsible for fixing everyone else's problems. Sometimes it feels like I am, like I should be doing more to help them." "Help with what? Learning new skills? Finding motivation? Accepting responsibility for their own lives? Those aren't things you can do for other people." "But I have resources they don't have. I have opportunities I could share." "You have those resources because you worked for them. You have those opportunities because you created them. Sharing them with people who haven't invested in developing the ability to use them responsibly would be wasteful and unfair to everyone involved." My grandmother's perspective was clearer than anyone else's in the family. She'd watched me build something from nothing while others made excuses for why it couldn't be done. She'd seen them laugh at my projections and then asked to benefit from the results when those projections became reality. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should keep being exactly who you are. Keep building your business. Keep setting high standards, and keep refusing to lower them for anyone. The people who matter will eventually understand, and the people who don't understand don't matter. Even if they're family? Especially if they're family. Family should want you to succeed on your own terms, not on theirs." That conversation gave me the clarity I needed to navigate the final phase of my family's crisis. When Mike called again a month later, asking one more time if there might be any position available for someone with his background, I was able to respond with confidence rather than guilt. "Mike, my answer hasn't changed, and it's not going to change. If you want to work in digital marketing, you need to develop digital marketing skills. If you want those skills badly enough, you'll find a way to get them regardless of your current circumstances." Easy for you to say from your corner office. It wasn't easy for me to say from my kitchen table, but I said it anyway. That's the difference between us. The call ended with the same frustration and resentment that had characterized all our recent conversations. But this time, I didn't feel guilty about maintaining my position. My grandmother was right. I wasn't responsible for solving problems that other people were unwilling to solve for themselves. The economic downturn that had devastated my family's traditional employment had created unprecedented opportunities for my business. Companies that had never considered digital marketing were now spending significant portions of their budgets on online strategies. We were booked solid for months in advance and turning down new clients because we couldn't handle the volume. By my 31st birthday, exactly 1 year after the disastrous restaurant celebration, my company was generating over $10 million in annual revenue. We'd grown to 75 employees across 5 offices in 3 states. Industry. Analysts were predicting we'd reach $50 million in revenue within 5 years. The same family members who had asked me for entry-level positions were now reading about my success in national business magazines. The brother who had accused me of forgetting where I came from was watching me appear on television as an expert in digital transformation. The father who had toasted my impossible millions was seeing those millions multiply into figures that made his lifetime earnings look like pocket change. The consequences of their disbelief had played out exactly as I'd predicted at that Thanksgiving dinner 5 years earlier. They were all looking for jobs while I was in a position to sign their paychecks, if they had possessed the qualifications that would make them worth hiring. The irony was complete, but it brought me no satisfaction. Success had never been about proving my family wrong. It had been about proving myself right. The fact that their inability to believe in me had excluded them from participating in that success was simply the natural result of choices they'd made years earlier. The consequences weren't punishment, they were just consequences. And consequences, unlike punishment, didn't require my participation or my guilt. They were simply the inevitable result of decisions made by people who preferred familiar limitations to unfamiliar possibilities. The Forbes magazine cover arrived at my office on a Thursday morning in October. My assistant, Caroline, brought it in with my usual stack of mail, but she couldn't hide her excitement as she placed it on top. 30 under 30. America's Young Entrepreneurs Reshaping Business, read the headline. And there I was, photographed in my corner office overlooking downtown Cleveland, arms crossed confidently against the backdrop of a city skyline that had become synonymous with my success. The article inside detailed my company's meteoric rise from a kitchen table startup to a multi-million-dollar digital marketing empire that now employed over 100 people across 7 offices in 4 states. The numbers were staggering, even to me. $15 million in annual revenue, partnerships with 12 Fortune 500 companies, and expansion plans that would take us international within the next 18 months. I set the magazine down and walked to my window, looking out at the city where my family still lived, still struggled, still couldn't quite comprehend what their youngest daughter had built while they weren't paying attention. The contrast between their world and mine had grown so vast that we might as well have been living on different planets. My phone buzzed with a text from my publicist. CNN wants you for their entrepreneurship special next month. Also got 3 speaking requests. From major conferences. Your calendar is getting insane. The speaking engagements had become a regular part of my schedule. Universities invited me to address their business students. Corporate conferences wanted me to share insights about digital transformation. Women's leadership organizations asked me to discuss overcoming skepticism and building success in male-dominated industries. Each time I told my story, I watched audiences react to the same journey that had seemed impossible to my own family. Strangers understood what my relatives never could. That breakthrough success required believing in possibilities that others couldn't see, and working toward goals that others considered unrealistic. The speaking fees alone now exceeded what most people made in a year. I'd gone from being lectured about getting a real job to being paid substantial amounts to talk about the job I'd created for myself and 99 other people. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call that would change everything once again. Ms. Thompson, this is David Martinez from Pinnacle Growth Partners. We're a private equity firm based in New York, and we've been following your company's trajectory with great interest. I'd been expecting this call for months. Private equity firms had been circling companies like mine, recognizing that digital marketing agencies with proven track records and strong client relationships were becoming incredibly valuable assets in an increasingly online economy. What can I do for you, Mr. Martinez? We'd like to discuss a potential acquisition. Based on our analysis of your revenue streams, growth trajectory, and market position, we believe your company could be valued at somewhere between $50 and $75 million. I nearly dropped the phone. $50 to $75 million. The numbers were so large they felt abstract, like theoretical mathematics rather than actual money. That's certainly an interesting proposition. What would an acquisition look like? Typically, we'd purchase a majority stake while allowing you to maintain operational control and continue growing the business. You'd receive a substantial payout upfront, plus performance bonuses tied to future growth targets. And you think my company is worth that much? Ms. Thompson, digital marketing is a $100 billion industry that's growing at 30% annually. Your company has captured significant market share in the Midwest and is positioned for national expansion. In our assessment, 50 million is actually conservative. After the call ended, I sat in my office processing what had just happened. A private equity firm was offering to buy my company for more money than I could have imagined when I'd left. That Thanksgiving dinner 6 years ago talking about seven-figure dreams. $50 million would make me wealthy beyond anything my family had ever contemplated. It would validate every prediction I'd made and every risk I'd taken. It would prove, in the most objective way possible, that the woman they'd laughed at had built something genuinely extraordinary. But it would also mean giving up the company I'd created, the team I'd assembled, and the independence I'd fought, so hard to achieve. I spent the next week in intensive meetings with lawyers, accountants, and business advisors, analyzing the offer and exploring alternatives. The more I learned about the acquisition process, the more I realized that selling to Pinnacle wasn't just about money, it was about legacy. If I sold the company, I'd become wealthy, but I'd no longer be building something. I'd become an investor, rather than an entrepreneur. I'd have more money than I could spend in a lifetime, but I'd lose the daily satisfaction of creating value, solving problems, and leading a team toward ambitious goals. The decision crystallized during a team meeting where we were discussing our expansion into the European market. As I watched my employees get excited about opening offices in London and Frankfurt, I realized that what I'd built wasn't just a business. It was a platform for other people's dreams and ambitions. Sarah, who'd started as my first employee answering emails from her apartment, was now our European expansion director. Marcus, who'd joined us as a junior analyst, was leading our Fortune 500 client relationships. Jessica, a recent college graduate I'd hired during a particularly busy period, had developed innovative social media strategies that other agencies were copying. These people hadn't just helped me build a successful company, I'd helped them build successful careers. Selling to private equity would potentially disrupt that dynamic, changing the culture and priorities that had made us successful in the first place. I called David Martinez back and told him I wasn't ready to sell. I appreciate the offer, but I want to continue growing the company independently for now. Ms. Thompson, opportunities like this don't come along often. The market. Conditions are perfect and your valuation is at its peak. I understand that, but I'm not optimizing for maximum payout. I'm optimizing for maximum impact. What if we increase the offer? Say, 80 million? It's not about the money, Mr. Martinez. It's about the mission. After I hung up, I realized something profound had happened. I'd turned down $80 million, more money than my family would earn in multiple lifetimes, because I valued what I was building more than what I could sell it for. That decision marked a fundamental shift in how I thought about success. Wealth was no longer the goal, it was just a byproduct of creating something meaningful. The news of the acquisition offer leaked somehow, as these things always do in the tight-knit business community. Within days, local media were reporting that Cleveland's most successful young entrepreneur had turned down a massive buyout offer to continue building her company. The story reached my family, of course. My mother called that evening. Her voice, a mixture of pride and bewilderment. "Emma, honey, I saw the news about the buyout offer. Is it true you turned down $80 million? It's true, Mom. But why? That's more money than our family has ever seen. Because the company is worth more to me than $80 million. How can anything be worth more than $80 million? It was the question everyone was asking, and the answer was difficult to explain to people who measured success purely in financial terms. How do you explain that purpose can be more valuable than profit? That building something lasting is more satisfying than cashing out for maximum return? Mom, remember when you used to ask me why I didn't just get a regular job with steady pay and good benefits? Of course. This is why. Because regular jobs don't give you the opportunity to build something that employs 100 people and serves hundreds of clients and grows every year into something bigger and more impactful. But you could retire with $80 million. You could do anything you wanted. I am doing what I want, Mom. That's the point. The conversation continued for an hour, with my mother trying to understand a mindset that was completely foreign to her experience. In her world, work was something you did to earn money to support the life you wanted to live. In my world, work was the life I wanted to live. Mike called the next day with a different perspective. Emma, I have to ask, are you sure you made the right decision? I mean, $80 million would set you up for life. I'm already set up for life, Mike. The company generates enough profit to support any lifestyle I want. But what if something happens? What if the market changes or competition increases? That $80 million was guaranteed money. Nothing is guaranteed, Mike. But I'd rather bet on my ability to keep building something great than settle for a payout that ends my involvement in the industry I love. You love it that much, even after all the stress and long hours and difficult decisions? Especially because of those things. Mike, do you love your work? There was a long pause. I don't hate it. That's the difference between us. I don't just love my work. I can't imagine doing anything else. The conversation revealed something I'd suspected for years. My family viewed work as a necessary evil, something to be endured in exchange for security and comfort. I viewed work as self-expression, as a way to create value and meaning that extended far beyond personal benefit. That fundamental difference in perspective explained why they'd never understood my career choices and why they couldn't comprehend turning down a massive financial windfall. 6 months later, my decision was vindicated in the most dramatic way possible. The European expansion exceeded all projections, adding $12 million in annual revenue within the first year. Our proprietary marketing automation platform, which we'd been developing internally, attracted interest from major technology companies who wanted to license our innovations. More importantly, we'd maintained the culture and values that had made us successful while scaling to a size that would have been impossible under private equity ownership. My company was now generating $28 million in annual revenue and was valued at over $150 million. I'd nearly doubled my net worth by refusing to sell, while maintaining complete control over the business I'd built. The transformation was complete. The woman who'd been laughed at for predicting 7-figure success was now running a company that generated 8 figures annually and employed 130 people across 3 countries. The little computer thing had become a multinational corporation that competitors studied and business schools used as a case study in entrepreneurial success. But the most significant transformation wasn't financial, it was personal. I'd evolved from someone who needed external validation to someone who was entirely self-directed. I no longer measured my worth by my family's opinion or anyone else's approval. I measured it by the impact I was having and the value I was creating. That Christmas, I hosted my own celebration instead of attending my parents' dinner. Not out of spite or resentment, but because I'd outgrown the need to fit into spaces that were too small for who I'd become. I invited my employees and their families, turning our main conference room into a festive celebration space. As I looked around at the people who'd helped build this success, some of whom had been with me since the kitchen table days, I realized that I'd created something more valuable than a profitable business. I'd created a community of people who shared my vision and values, who understood that work could be meaningful and fulfilling, who believed in building something bigger than themselves. Sarah approached me during the party, holding her young daughter who was fascinated by the twinkling lights we'd strung around the office. Emma, I just want to thank you for everything you've done, not just the job, but the opportunity to be part of something special. You've been part of it since the beginning, Sarah. I couldn't have built this without you. I know, but I also know that you could have sold the company and made us all irrelevant. The fact that you chose to keep building instead of cashing out means everything to those of us who work here. Marcus joined our conversation, raising his glass of champagne. Here's to Emma, who taught us that success isn't about proving other people wrong. it's about proving yourself right. The toast was taken up by the entire room, but the words that meant the most came from Jessica, the young woman who'd joined us straight out of college and was now managing multi-million-dollar client accounts. Emma showed me that you don't have to choose between ambition and integrity. You can build something huge without compromising your values or abandoning the people who helped you get there. As the celebration continued around me, I stepped out onto the office balcony to get some air and perspective. Downtown Cleveland spread out below me, the same city where my family had laughed at my projections and suggested I get a customer service job. My phone buzzed with a text from my grandmother, now 90 years old, but still sharp and insightful. Saw the company Christmas party photos online. You look happy, dear. That's the only success that really matters. She was right. Happiness had been the missing piece for so many years, the thing I'd been chasing without realizing it. Not the happiness that comes from external validation or financial security, but the happiness that comes from living according to your own values and building something that reflects who you truly are. 6 years ago, I'd left my family's Thanksgiving dinner, promising to remember who had believed in me and who had laughed. I'd kept that promise, but not in the way anyone had expected. Instead of seeking revenge or excluding people out of resentment, I'd simply built something so successful and meaningful that their opinions had become irrelevant. I'd transformed from someone who needed their approval into someone who didn't require anyone's permission to succeed. The family members who'd once offered me career advice were now reading about my achievements in national publications. The brother who'd suggested I get a real job was watching me appear on television as a business expert. The parents who'd worried about my stability were seeing me build something more stable and sustainable than any traditional career path. But more importantly, I'd become someone I was proud to be. Not because of the money or the recognition, or the magazine covers, but because I'd stayed true to my vision even when everyone around me thought it was impossible. The woman who'd sat at the kids' table, dismissed and underestimated, had built a corporation that would outlast all of us. The dreams they'd laughed at had become realities that exceeded even my own projections. And the best part was that I was just getting started. At 32, I had decades ahead of me to keep building, keep growing, keep proving that the only limitations that matter are the ones you accept for yourself. As I walked back into the celebration, surrounded by the team that had helped make everything possible, I realized that success wasn't about showing anyone else what I could do. It was about showing myself what was possible when you refused to let other people's limitations become your own. The little girl who'd built elaborate structures out of blocks and cardboard boxes had simply never stopped building. She'd just learned to use different materials and create structures that could house dreams instead of toys. And tomorrow, she'd wake up ready to build something even bigger. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.